But Pete, I know one of the big things that we're trying to do here, we're trying to promote, is you guys, our community here at DnDTime, which of course you can join the community by going to dndtime.stream, #Discord, and joining our Discord channel. But yeah, if one of the things we're trying to do is promote you guys to actually create your own homebrew content and share it and build a community where we're all, I guess, sharing our ideas and building cool content together.
Yeah. Trying to be creative, trying to come up with new ideas.
And yeah, so I'm going to just quickly, if you look on the screen right now, you can see our workshop, our whole Discord here. And down here toward the bottom area, you can see our Fantasy Lab section, where you can get all of from the lab announcements of our homebrew available content. Our workshop, which is where you guys can share your ideas. There's a bunch of stuff we'll be talking about here in a minute, from V-Bunny and Cold Spark. And I think that's it for today. And then completed works, where if you think you've polished something off, ready to share it, currently there's nothing there, guys. Who's going to be the first one to share a completed work?
It may be me. We'll see. If you guys hurry up and put together something that's really crisp, you might get in there before me. I had a rogue subclass I wanted to have people take a little bit of a look at before we brought it on to labs, though. And we were doing so many bards right now, I thought I wouldn't break it out today on the show. And keep it in the bard zone. Yeah,
we're almost like, this is almost a bard month. This is our accidental, themed month.
Yes, and on the subject of that, while we're kind of here in, I guess, maybe announcements mode to a degree, yes. I think next week is going to be the official, Bard Day. A week from this Sunday, we're doing another Bard subclass today, but we're going to be going through and kind of doing, we're going to re-go through the Color Bard and the Therapist Bard, I believe, with some touch-ups.
Now College of Guidance.
Yeah, now College of Guidance, indeed. So on the subject of touch-ups, it's already been edited to a degree. And perhaps, unless I guess we go through your Mystique College of Mystique today, Jeremy, and it's immaculate, but perhaps
it's pretty much perfect. So I don't think I'm going to have to change very much between now and next week.
Question mark? As well as, I would also really like to encourage people hanging out tonight to, if you have any ideas for Bard-related content, it does not have to be so elaborate as a Bard subclass. It could be a player, it could be a race that would be a spell. It could be a new spell that's usable by a bard, a magic item that a bard could wield. It could be literally anything. But the theme for next week is bards. So if you guys have bard-related ideas, turn them around in your brain. Post them in the workshop, post them in completed works, and get them out there.
Yeah, and even if it's just ideas that you just don't have the time to totally hash out, it's still a great idea to share them and say, hey, I have these ideas if anyone wants to take it and run with it. Because I'll tell you, odds are, if you post some really cool ideas in the workshop, that's going to inspire more of our community members to take that and really flush it out if you don't have the time to do it yourself. Absolutely. So I think it's a really awesome place to be, a really awesome little community.
So without further ado, Jeremy, do you want to start talking about some of those? We had a couple of things that did pop up in the workshop. Do you want to talk about those before we get into the new One-Off Arcana, which is going to be most of what we're doing today?
So here we are. We are on to our next little dooba-doo here. Here we got a couple of cool ideas that came through our workshop this week. You want to talk a little bit about them, Pete?
Yeah. The first one was by V-Bunny. And I also want to note, we always kind of said...
Also, hello everyone who's hopped in chat. I see Matty Morgan, Roger Twy, and Van Sunny, and I'm sure there are more of you are lurking in the shadows. Just saying hello. I don't want you to feel like we've missed you here.
Yeah, and also I wanted to say, as we're going through, we always kind of would say when we used to do DnDTime brews, feel free to chime up if you have any thoughts or comments, which is of course true. But I would say even more so than that,
please chime up.
Yeah, I don't want to say feel obligated, but if you are looking at something that's going on the screen and you see the Shadow Amulet, for example, and you think, oh, this would be massively improved by this idea, please share it. Give us the benefit of your inspiration, both for me and Jeremy alike. We'd really appreciate it. And not just us, but everyone here could learn from what you have to say. So please speak up if you have ideas.
I could not agree more, Pete.
Let's do it. Shadow Amulet.
Take it away. Take her away.
Yeah,
This is again created by VBunny23 in the chatter.
I don't know if VBunny's here at the moment, but if you are, VBunny, thank you for sharing this in the workshop. Let's get into it. The Shadow Amulet was a wondrous item and an artifact that would require attunement by a warlock.
So this is a magic item, Pete. We're not talking about subclasses. We're not about classes. Just a cool magic item.
Yeah, and the magic item is one of my favorite spaces, but
absolutely.
Let me get into it. This amulet is fashioned from a single shard of shadowy material originating from the realm of your warlock patron. While you are wearing it, you gain the following benefits. You can use the amulet as a spellcasting focus for your warlock spells. You can try to cast a cantrip that you don't know. The cantrip can be from any spell list, and you must make a spellcasting check with a roll of 1d20 plus your spellcasting modifier versus a DC of 10 plus the number of spells currently known by the amulet. If the check succeeds, you cast the spell, and the spell becomes known by the amulet. If the check fails, so does the spell, and the action used to cast the spell is wasted. Additionally, the amulet loses one cantrip known by the amulet. Casting a cantrip known by the amulet treats the DC as a DC of 0. In either case, you can't use this property again until you finish a long rest.
This is a really neat item, actually.
Yeah, I'm really into the direction of this. So to kind of re-summarize what the core idea here is, this is a magic amulet that you can use to cast any cantrip in the game, and you have to teach it cantrips by trying to cast them through it. And every single time that you do attempt to cast one, if you fail it, you lose one of the ones that you already had stored. So it's kind of this balancing act where it gets harder and harder to add new ones to it, and you kind of, you jump back and forth, and you have this floating extra pool of cantrips that are in the amulet. And that, I think, is righteous. I'm really into this item.
Yeah, I think magic items. Just a quick thing about magic. One of the reasons they're so great is because, unlike a subclass where if you're playing at a higher level in your campaign, a new subclass probably doesn't mean squat for you because you already have a subclass. You don't need it. Magic items. These are candy, right? This is candy for your players, for your dungeon masters. Right. This is just anyone can use these literally anywhere. And I will say, I think this one's really neat. I like just from a flavor. So looking at our little rubric real quick, right? Space, absolutely a patron related magic item. Super lots of room for that in D&D. It's also really it can be personalized for a player. Balance, it's cantrips. I mean, you're not going to bust anything with balance there. Playability, that's where we kind of have a couple minor nitpicks.
Where I was going to start getting into a little bit of a shakier area, but
the design's pretty cool, and I think the flavor's great. Yeah, you did decide it was shadowy, which does somewhat limit it for some of the patrons, but I don't, sometimes you got to just make some choices to give it some flavor. Yeah. So I think this is pretty good.
The one kind of issue to offer a little constructive feedback on this, for one thing, this doesn't feel quite like an artifact tier item to me.
Yeah.
Usually when I think of an artifact, I think of something that is singular and unique. And this is very much, it kind of says even in the item, where it's of a shadowy material originating from the realm of your warlock patron, it's intentionally kind of more neutral and generic. And usually, artifacts are the Hand of Vecna, a one-off with crazy attunement categories that are items of legend, which I don't know if the Shadow Amulet would necessarily fall into that category in its current iteration of flavor.
Yeah, well, and I think that's fine, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with a rare magic item, which I think this would probably fit under the rare category, is what I would put it. It'd be a really good rare magic item.
Yeah, I was thinking it was on the edge between rare and very rare, but I think rare. I think you're right with that. And
the one thing, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to mention, if you want to talk playability a little bit.
Yeah, I think the really simple thing to consider, because playability, when you're considering that, right, is there anything here that could be difficult for a dungeon master or player to understand or frustrating to come up with? And I think the losing a cantrip might fall under that. Yeah, that's my only real thought. lose, because then you've got to roll to figure it out. And I know it says like you can only use this once per day, which is kind of the limiter, right? Of the person just sitting there like, all right, I try every cantrip until I get them all. Right.
It's harsher, but I would almost rather it be you lose all of them than you lose one.
Man, I would just rather it never lose cantrip.
And then lower the DC. Well, I think there's something very flavorful about every time you're doing it, like, oh, I need this right now, but it might ruin my item. That seems, even though it's like obviously not as good, that seems more fun to me from at least from a dungeon master perspective. As a player, of course, I'd be like, well, I'd rather have all the cantrips, but I think...
Big yikes.
But I think it's more dramatic. If I received this item as a player, it would feel cooler to me if I didn't know that the other one was an option. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of get what you're feeling there. I don't know. But I think it's pretty neat. I really like this still. I think it's actually got some really nice little notes here, right? So, like, if the cantrip is known by the amulet, you treat the DC as 0. That's a really nice little, like, addition there, right? Like, yeah, you can't fail. And it's just a nice, finesse, simple way of putting that. Personally, I would probably put the known cantrips as, like, you can always cast them rather than a once per day deal.
Oh, okay. You just have those cantrips.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably how I would recommend it, but I think this is a really sweet item. It's definitely going in a really awesome direction. Yeah. Good mechanics, pretty straightforward. It's just solid.
And After 232 asks, does it specify which cantrip is lost? It does not at the moment. So if it was going to go in this form, it would need to be a little bit clearer about that. You identified the idea that does the player get to pick which one is lost, or is it the earliest one learned, or do you have to roll for it? That would need to be specified in the item if this was going to be given to a player. So that's an area of cleanup. And maybe there's a few points where language could be touched a bit in places, but I don't
you don't have to worry about
nitpick that. Certainly not. It's still in the workshop, so it's still in a work in progress. I think even V-Bunny said something that he's still kind of toying with a bit, but I think that the direction is really cool.
Absolutely. I'll be honest, I would use something like this in a game that I would run. Absolutely. Agreed. It's just a very cool concept.
Agreed.
But we had another really cool concept too.
Well, I just want to point out one more comment from Blood Juice, who says he thinks that we're overvaluing cantrips. I think that the utility of cantrips is not to be understated. Personally, there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of cool things that you can do with cantrips, especially if you have the right cantrip for the situation. Maybe it's just guaranteeing a medicine check when you have no other way to save it down party, if that's something that you need to suddenly do. Or Mage Hand is like, there's so many cantrips that you might not have that have so much flexibility in their use.
I see. This was a comment in regards to Cold Spark. Cold Spark was saying, if you know the cantrips, it's legendary. I see what you're saying. Yeah, actually, one note here. This doesn't actually say anything about what the spellcasting ability modifiers are for the cantrips. Well. So that's something probably to note. I mean, obviously it uses yours. I think that was
assumed yours. Yeah.
But that does need to be stated in here. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it makes it legendary. I mean, it's good, but I don't know. I don't think this is
I agree in that regard. Yeah, I thought you were saying more for like if it wasn't even
pretty cool.
But yeah, agreed.
Let's now hop on down to the false polymorph. Actually, one last note, V-Bunny, if you do see this, which I'm sure you'll see it at some point, we'll link you to it at the very least. I'm really excited to see where you go with this. I'm really interested in seeing what the final form comes. I really think it'd be awesome if like everyone in the community wanted to make like a cool little collection of patron themed magic items that could go into a. That just sounds so cool to me, right?
Agreed.
A DM's play box here.
And if you do end up completing this, toss it in completed works, or keep working on the workshop too.
And thank you again for the submission, or for sharing your ideas. Pete, let's talk about false polymorph, because this is another one here.
Cold Spark, and I see Cold Spark's hanging out. So, Cold Spark put up a first level illusion spell called False Polymorph. It has a casting time of 1 action, a range of 30 feet. I assume 30 feet there. Components.
It's miles, Pete.
Yeah, I mean,
not nautical miles specifically. Oh, actually, this is Ghost of Saltmarsh, so it'll be leagues.
That'd be funny as hell. That would actually be... Jeremy, you're joking, but that could be a very cool thing for like a high-level spell that's meant at sea, range 30 leagues.
That actually could be really sick. Sorry, Pete, go on.
Components are going to be verbal, somatic, and material, with the material component being a caterpillar's cocoon, and its duration is 1 hour with concentration. And what it does is... Oh, I wonder if I... let me just look at something.
Looks like Pete, you lost half of it.
Did I miss a little bit of the spell?
Yeah, no, you definitely did. Well, first of all, Pete goes and figures that out and puts it in here. I just want to take a quick note about spells in general. Spells are so hard. There are so many spells already in 5th edition D&D, and they cover such a broad spectrum because spells in 5e have a lot less flavor to them and are a lot more generic, you can make them what you want kind of ideas, as opposed to like in previous editions. So
I read this earlier, and I could have sworn that it had a bit about it describing the beast form over you, but I don't see it currently where it is on the spell in the workshop. But I am...
Yeah, I will look for it as well, because I definitely also saw that.
Yeah, I know I read it at one point.
Cold Spark, where'd it go? It's hiding.
At one point, this said essentially, it acted similar to a disguised self, where you put, you put the spell over yourself, and then, or maybe I filled it in with my mind because Cold Spark had mentioned that it was meant to function like a disguised self. But the idea is you disguise yourself as a beast that you might polymorph someone into instead of doing an actual polymorph and changing their shape. So for the first half, assume that it functions similar to a disguised self in that regard. And that is then the image lasts for the duration or until the target drops to 0 hit points or dies. The new form can be any beast whose challenge rating is 9 or lower. The target maintains all its game statistics of its normal form, including hit points and armor class. The target may take any action it may normally take. However, any speech from the target is heard by others as sounds the beast would naturally make. Any gear the target may have is also covered or hidden by the image of the new form.
It's a very interesting spell. I think definitely not a first level.
Agreed.
I would definitely put this probably at the second level.
Yeah, I think it's on the borderline.
Definitely not a third.
Cold Spark was saying I think you may have accidentally deleted it when removing a bunch of markdowns. Happens.
That's all right. But I think it's a really cool. I think it's a really cool feature, right? I love this. It's kind of like, it reminds me of the seeming spell, which I think is a 6th level spell.
Kind of a one-person seeming in a lot of ways. And I like the, I don't even know if you need, it says beast of challenge rating 9 or lower. Oh, great, we have that now.
Thank you, by the way, Cold Spark.
I don't even know if it needs that challenge rating restriction on it. I think you could just kind of say any beast.
Well, it's any beast.
Just joshing, yeah. Because at 9th level or lower, you're pretty much hitting any beast anyway. I think the only other things that might be a little bit higher are some like legendary beasts that are like specific versions of, say, a T-Rex or something like that. But 9 or lower covers all of the big ones anyway. So I think you could just say any beast as a matter of simplicity. And
I personally disagree. I like the challenge rating restriction on it, but
how come?
Because I think that adds some. Here's the thing, right? Like, a lot of spells in 5e that involve beasts or creatures, they have challenge rating restrictions, and part of the oomph of upcasting that spell would be to up the challenge rating restriction. I could see this as like a really cool, right, for each level above, you know, if this were a 2nd level spell, right?
I see what you're saying.
I just think that could be really cool.
Yeah,
as like a way to give this a scaling oomph to it.
I think if you're going that direction, yeah, absolutely. You could make that a way for it to scale. If you're not going to do that scaling thing, I don't think you need to specify it, but I think that's a good reason to add that in, because that's just a cool way of, oh, I want to make myself into an illusory T-Rex. I'm going to cast
players
false polymorph scale at the highest level I can.
Here's some DM insight right there, by the way. This is from my personal experience dungeon mastering. Players don't like spells that don't scale with level. Even if they're great spells at every level, like Grease is a good spell no matter what. If you're a level 14 wizard, Grease is still a good spell. But no 14th level wizard will ever cast Grease for the most part. Like far and away. 99% of them won't. And it's because it doesn't scale with level, and that's the only reason they won't do it. So I would want to add the scaling here just to give it the illusion, right, of this added value with higher level castings.
And
that's my personal take.
Cold Spark was saying the CR9 or lower comes out of true polymorph's object to creature restriction, so it's kind of a nod to that.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. That's cool. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the level of the spell, all said and done. Second level, I think, feels right for me too. You were saying third is too much for you?
Well, right. I think that the interesting part here is this makes an illusion, right? And what is the DC to see through this illusion? That's I think the important note here. Because, right, this obfuscated speech, which there's some serious value in that, right? There could be some serious value in being able to obfuscate the speech of an enemy that you false polymorph so that their allies can't hear them.
Interesting.
And that's some interesting utility that you probably don't think of off the top, right?
Yeah, and there's a question of, is that something that you even want to be in the spell, or does this want to be on a willing creature? Which is, that's questionable either way, which way you'd want to go with that.
I would personally, I think this would be better. I know it's different than the classic polymorph spells, but I think it would be more appropriate to target a willing creature, because this is a false polymorph. It's not a real polymorph.
Yeah.
Just to avoid that potential issue.
But that's an interesting, I didn't even consider that potential effect of muting an enemy with this, which, I mean, I'm on the fence even there, because that is kind of cool. It is very cool. And I think that the seeming spell is another one to really look at and use as an example here. And maybe you keep the saving throw like in the seeming spell. I mean, it doesn't really, can go either way, but some text like, the changes wrought by this spell failed to hold up to physical inspection, right? Could be an idea. Or a creature can use its action to inspect the target to make an intelligence investigation check against your spell save DC. Yep. On success, it becomes aware that the creature is disguised, right? Having that language, I think, is kind of necessary for a spell like this. But overall, I actually really love this concept. I think one of the things that After was saying Cold Spark was saying in the chat, in the workshop, was, because there's a polymorph and a true polymorph, that implies there has to be a false polymorph. And besides being fun and playful, which is, in my opinion, enough of a reason to want to make it, I think it's actually like a cool, unique, new thing for the game too. Agreed.
I could see myself using the spell.
Yeah. Also
even
agreed.
At third level, I could see myself using this spell.
Cool sort of intimidation play that you can do. And I think another good spell to compare against when considering that level is Major Image, which is a third level spell. Major Image has more utility, but it's also a little bit more work to use, which is why I was kind of on the fence between second and third. Because, Major Image, you can make an image of a gigantic elephant that's rampaging around with sound effects, but you then also have to use additional actions to control it, as opposed to here, I think it's implied that you just move, the image of you moves like the creature, so you kind of get that effect for free, but it's very much restricted to beasts, and it has to be on a person, so...
Another note about this that you might want to consider adding in is there's a spell called Phantasmal Force, I think is what the spell is called. That is one I want. It's one of the Phantasmal spells. I'm pretty sure it's Phantasmal Force, where if the creature takes damage from the Phantasmal Force, it justifies in its mind the damage. I think something like that might be really relevant here, right? If a creature takes damage from the disguised or the false polymorphed creature, does it immediately realize, oh, I just got slashed by a sword from like the knee of this T-Rex? Right? Does it realize that, or does the spell somehow rationalize it to that creature?
That would definitely.
Does it also disguise the attacks? And these are all things to just consider. Because if it doesn't do that, maybe it's a second level spell. If it does do it, maybe it's a third level. I don't know. Those are all not really. Those are what we call balance questions, not necessarily anything more.
Yeah, which there's a lot of intricacy to, and there's a lot of like more minute directions that you can go to this. But if you decide to keep working on this Cold Spark, I would be really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I really love it. I'd use this spell.
Agreed.
Or something like it.
Illusion, I wish there was more. I like people designing for the illusion school because there's not enough cool illusion spells, in my opinion.
100%.
And Max Meister just popped in saying hello,
hey, Max.
Jeremy. What are we doing? Community-made spells? Because if so, if we're making our own spells, Max has a funny idea. Says, well, we're not doing necessarily community-made spells as like a show. This was something that Cold Spark had posted in the workshop on Discord, where we're just encouraging people. Because I know, Max, I think you're referencing a previous kind of like from Bruce. We do call outs for like this week we're gonna all do spells. If you have an idea for a spell, pop it in. We're just gonna be doing anything that you are inspired by, post it in the workshop, and we'll on a given week talk about it on the stream if we have time. And there's not too many. I think at the moment anything that anyone posts in the workshop we're gonna be trying to do. So
absolutely. So if you want to see
your idea in there,
if you want to see your stuff from the show, just take a little bit and clean it up a little, throw it in the workshop, get some back and forth ideas from the people in the channel, and then we'll look at it on Sunday. So,
indeed.
And it's like we were saying, we're going to try really hard to do that, like as much as we possibly can.
This is kind of the
primary goal.
I would say this is what we're doing right here is the most important part of Fantasy Labs. Absolutely. Is going through all of your stuff and like
empowering you guys.
Yeah, so please, we will do that as our first pick. But with that, let's look at stuff that wasn't made by our community.
Well, and thank you again, Cold Spark, for sharing. We really appreciate it, and
thanks, Cold Spark.
It's really neat.